Two Soviet-designed T-72 tanks sit idle in the scorching desert of Iraq. They're all alone, no planes in the sky, and their radar screens show nothing but emptiness for miles around. The crews are relaxed, feeling invincible. Suddenly, one of the tanks erupts in a massive fireball. But who could have landed such a precise shot from so far away? The answer? The legendary Abrams tank. Is there a symbol of American military might more iconic than the Abrams tank? Widely considered to be one of the best tanks ever produced, not only is it an all-around beast of a vehicle that can hit targets from miles away, but before the war in Ukraine, the Abrams was one of the only tanks in history that had never been taken out by an enemy tank. So today we're giving this incredible example of American engineering its due as we look at just how it hits those targets that are miles away and other insane facts. Let's get started. The Abrams got its big debut in Desert Storm, where it faced off against a fleet of Soviet T-55s, T-62s, and the newer T-72s, along with domestic copies produced under license, and it's been dominating other tanks from the get-go. To be fair to the Russians, Iraqi T-72s were using shells that were already obsolete by then, the 3BM9 APF SDS, which the Soviets had phased out by the 1970s. This round was known to penetrate up to 245 millimeters of armor at a range of 2,500 meters, which sounds impressive, until you remember that they were up against the Abrams, which means Iraq's tanks never even got a chance to shoot that far. That's because the Abrams it was facing could reach out from well over 3,000 meters to deliver a killing blow with a single round. How? It's all thanks to the Abrams' absolutely insane armament. This consists of a 120mm smoothbore cannon, a major upgrade over the original 105mm cannon it sported during the Cold War. The M256 is designed by Rheinmetall AG, the same designer of the Leopard tank, with better thickness and chamber pressure than the same cannon used on the Leopard 2s up to the Leopard 2A5. The Abrams can be equipped with a variety of rounds, up to 42 in total. This includes the M829 family of rounds, armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sabots, meant to punch straight through tank armor, like a single medical bill through your financial hopes and dreams. Known as silver bullets, the rounds have an effective range of up to 4,000 meters, or roughly 2.5 miles, which meant that during the Gulf War, they could turn the Iraqi Soviet-made tanks into Swiss cheese at ranges so great that the enemy couldn't fire back. M830A1 high-explosive tank rounds are an improvement over the classic M8230s used in Desert Storm. This new variant includes a higher initial velocity and multi-purpose fuse, allowing the round to be used to blow holes in enemy tanks or to turn enemy infantry into bite-sized chunks. A new, even more lethal replacement has been in development since 2012, with Orbital ATK selected to develop the XM1147 Advanced Multi-Purpose Round, which will replace it. The M908 is a high-explosive anti-obstacle round rushed into production in 1996 after the retirement of the M728 combat engineer vehicle and its 165mm M123 demolition round. This round's mission is to clear hardened concrete obstacles meant to stop attacking infantry, but it does just as well at destroying small buildings or really most things that get in the way. The round itself is a modification of the M8230A1, which removed the proximity switch on the round's nose with a steel nose. This allows the round to burrow into its target before detonating. The M1069 high-explosive round is a general-purpose round for exploding things that the enemy would prefer not explode. For defense against hordes of infantry, the M1028 is basically a shotgun shell sized for a tank. Filled with dozens of steel pellets, the M1028 is the answer to the question, what if you played the classic Nintendo game Duck Hunt, but with war crimes? The Abrams is not just a sharpshooter though, it's equipped with some of the toughest armor on Earth. So tough in fact that none were actually lost to enemy fire. That's right, during Desert Storm, many Abrams were struck by enemy fire, though none of them resulted in a single fatality or direct destruction of the tank. However, there were catastrophic Abrams kills, all coming from friendly fire. In the chaos of the combat, numerous friendly fire incidents between Abrams tanks occurred, and even then, the Abrams proved tough enough to stand up to even itself. The same silver bullets that were splitting Soviet tanks in two failed to penetrate the front armor of friendly Abrams tanks, as well as the front turret armor. However, the side and rear armor were not as strong, a known issue with tanks as these massive vehicles can't possibly armor their entire body equally, or else they would never budge when fired up. 2 tanks were not destroyed due to direct tank-on-tank friendly fire though. On April 5, 2003, an Abrams tank was struck by a recoilless rifle. The attack did not damage the vehicle significantly, but it did manage to start a small fire. The fire, however, proved to be too stubborn to put out, and eventually the tank commander made the decision to abandon the vehicle, taking the time to remove or destroy all sensitive equipment inside the tank. The crew then poured oil and .50 caliber rounds into the body of the vehicle, opened up the ammo compartment doors, and even dropped several thermite grenades inside. To put a nail in the Abrams coffin and prevent the Iraqis from claiming it as a war trophy, a fellow Abrams put a heat round straight into the stricken tank. Incredibly, all of this only resulted in the tank becoming disabled, but not destroyed. As the ground offensive of Desert Storm began, Iraq had heavily fortified avenues of approach. These were few and easy to predict, given the fact that the surrounding environment was extremely hostile and a featureless desert. Thus, Iraq only had to cover the highways and other known routes. But Iraq had completely failed to appreciate one major technological development in the hands of Abrams tanks. Using early GPS receivers, Abrams commanders were able to precisely know their exact location at all times, along with the location of other friendly forces. Utilizing GPS, columns of Abrams tanks and Bradley IFVs roared through the desert before turning a hard hook straight into the enemy's flanks. This was so unexpected that most times U.S. forces discovered Iraqi forces still sitting in idling tanks, buried up to their turrets in sand and facing the wrong way. At night, the advantage was even more in the Abrams' favor, given that the exported T-72s do not come equipped with modern night vision sights. Some Iraqi tanks had floodlights or older active infrared systems for fighting at night, but nothing like the starlight and passive infrared scopes equipped on the standard Abrams. This advantage proved to be decisive, with Iraqi forces overwhelmed by American night attacks. Everyone in Iraq loved the first war so much that they were overjoyed to hear the US would be bringing in even more freedom in the action-packed sequel. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq for reasons that still remain a mystery to this day, even to professional defense analysts. Making a repeat showing, the Abrams would once more spearhead US forces in an assault lasting just 25 days. Iraq had learned its lessons from the First War well, and instead of trying to stand toe-to-toe with the US, it opted for a more asymmetric campaign. This meant that the primary threat to the Abrams this time around was from man-portable systems, in many ways more difficult to defend against than traditional tank fire. It's believed that 2 Abrams were struck using Russian-made Kornet anti-tank guided missiles, though Russia would claim it didn't sell those types of weapons to Iraq. The tank crews were able to bail out with no serious injuries, with the ammo blowout panel doing its job and saving their lives. Ambushes employing RPG-7s also succeeded in disabling several Abrams tanks, with Iraqi soldiers either aiming for the rear of the vehicle or the tracks. The front and the side armor was too strong for the RPGs to penetrate. But does the Abrams have an Achilles heel? The asymmetric campaign in Iraq did expose several key weaknesses of the Abrams tank, though to be fair, they're universal weaknesses of all tanks. Despite being superior combat weapons, the tank is really only designed to take on other tanks and armored vehicles. Despite this, its overwhelming power makes it invaluable in close-quarters urban fighting. But this too would be the most dangerous place for the Abrams to operate. IEDs and RPGs fired from above would destroy several Abrams, or if the tank survived, the crew may not have. Mobility kills were far more common, creating a serious problem for U.S. forces as they faced the prospect of having to abandon the vehicle, attempting a recovery operation that would expose them to even more enemy fire, or do the enemy's job for them and destroy it themselves. One key weakness for the Abrams was its rear, which RPGs could easily penetrate to damage or destroy the engine. Slat armor would be adopted in the rear of the Abrams, looking a bit like window blinds. The armor doesn't stop the RPG by itself. Rather, much like you, slat armor makes the RPG explode prematurely and away from the body of the tank. This helps dissipate the force of the molten jet that's used to bore through thick armor. Reactive armor was also added to the sides of the tank. These explosive armor panels operate on a similar principle but are useful against most types of anti-tank threats, even other tank rounds. As projectiles approach, the ERA explodes outward, sending a plate of armor hurling through the air toward the incoming threat. That threat then strikes that armor well away from the body of the tank, which might either deflect it and/or rob it of energy, lessening its effects up against the main armor. To help against the threat of enemy infantry in buildings and windows, the gunner's M240 machine gun received a gun shield as well as a thermal sight. The tank commander's 50 caliber machine gun was replaced with a remote weapon turret, also carrying a 50 cal. The addition of a telephone system on the exterior of the tank helps them directly communicate with the tank crew even under intense fire. This was a major problem earlier in the war, with infantry unable to talk directly to the tank comrades. Some Marine Abrams tanks would get equipped with a soft-kill active protection system. The ANVLQ-6 missile countermeasure device was strapped onto the hull of the tank and would emit an infrared signal toward an incoming missile, confusing the seeker. This system worked on radio and even wire-guided missiles, as well as infrared homing missiles. The only problem was it didn't destroy the missile, it simply confused it. So the Abrams problem suddenly became the unprotected infantry's problem. The military simply shrugged its shoulders, though, and remarked that if any Marine infantry wanted to live long, healthy lives, they should have learned to read and write instead. But despite any weaknesses, the Abrams still has an almost spotless destruction record. As previously mentioned, for a long time, the Abrams was one of the only tanks in history that had never been taken out by an enemy tank, although it did lose that prestigious title when a downgraded Abrams was lost in Ukraine. However, if we tally up the total number of Soviet tanks destroyed in both Desert Storm and the 2003 invasion of Iraq alone, the Abrams still boasts an impressive kill ratio of approximately 300 to 1 if we account for the one lost in Ukraine, which means it's still in first place among all the tanks when it comes to kill-death ratio. But the war in Ukraine has resulted in the Abrams having a massive target painted on its back. In 2023, after the EU blue-balled Ukraine for a year on sending tanks, the dam finally broke and Ukraine got the Leopards it asked for. However, Germany demanded that in order to give permission for countries to send their Leopards, the US had to agree to send its own tanks as well. President Biden authorized 31 Abrams tanks to be sent to the battlefields of Ukraine. Russia saw this as an opportunity to humiliate the West and deter Western populations from agreeing to send more heavy equipment to Ukraine. It formed hunter-killer teams with the specific job of responding anywhere on the front line that a Western tank was spotted and destroying it, filming it if possible for propaganda value. German and American tanks even had bounties placed on them, with large cash payouts to any Russian stupid enough to try to kill one with anything less than a total artillery barrage. The Abrams and the Challenger proved to be real prizes, given their rarity and status as symbols of American and British power. In 2024, a video made its way online of Russia showing off destroyed Western equipment in Moscow for awestruck crowds. Among them was an Abrams main battle tank, with evidence showing it was likely disabled instead of destroyed and then captured when Ukrainian forces were unable to rescue the vehicle. Immediately, Russia rolled out the propaganda touting the deadly effectiveness of Russian weapons and the hopeless vulnerability of American tanks. Knowing that Ukraine could not make use of its Abrams the same way the US does, and thus the captured tanks and losses would be inevitable, the US stripped out everything secret or sensitive from the vehicles, including its extremely classified armor package with plates of depleted uranium and other technology. In effect, the tank that Ukraine got was close to the tank that the Russians would have had to face if a war broke out in the 1980s between East and West, a far cry from the most modern Abrams fielded by the US Army today. Even underpowered as it is, Ukrainian crews acknowledge that the greatest threat to their Abrams has been drones, not other tanks. Drones have revolutionized tank warfare given their ability to strike at the thin top armor, with active protection systems now being a part of the latest upgrade to the US's own Abrams. But is the Abrams still invincible in the face of new military tech? In May 2024, there was a news report of a Ukrainian crew complaining about their Abrams tank. According to the crew, the tank was lacking armor, it frequently broke down, and its electronics could get fried by rain or fog. There was also a complaint that its gun was underpowered, with the crew stating they fired 17 times into a house and it was still standing afterward. The complaints quickly spread across the internet, with Russian bots fast on the uptake and spreading the misinformation at a bewildering rate. However, commentary by Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, former tanker in the US Army, boiled it down to a skill issue. The general called the complaints that the tank's electronics were being affected by rain or fog nonsense, reminding the world that the Abrams may have seen action in the desert, but it's a tank that was designed to fight on European battlefields. At $10 million a pop, a light drizzle deadening your tank would be a criminal waste of resources. This photo of an Abrams going for a swim should put to rest any doubts about its electronics staying safe from water damage. Likewise, this Abrams operating perfectly fine in the rain is indicative that the crew may have been talking out of their posterior. When talking about the armor, the Ukrainian crew was explicitly referencing the tank's vulnerability to drones, a common problem for any tank. They complained that as soon as their tanks got anywhere near the front line, the enemy responded by sending drones, thus forcing them to use their vehicles as artillery instead. However, the fact that the Ukrainian Abrams did have their classified armor packages replaced with less capable armor does mean that their tanks aren't as well protected as they'd normally be. On top of all of that is the claim that they fired 17 rounds into a house and it was still standing afterward, a condemnation on the Abrams' firepower. There are numerous rounds available for the Abrams, and they're not all suitable for all jobs. A discarding Sabot anti-tank round, for example, is going to punch through the house and the next 10 houses behind it, causing relatively little damage to the home structure, but making life for anyone inside the room the round passes through extremely unpleasant. In all likelihood, the Ukrainian crew either used or had the wrong type of round made available to them, resulting in their frustration. As this video from the invasion of Iraq of an Abrams blowing up a tower used by a sniper shows, the tank has no problem destroying infrastructure in one shot when the right round is used. One key difference between the Abrams and its Russian counterparts is a basic safety feature that helps prevent crew casualties, and whose lack turns Russian tankers into Russian cosmonauts. It's a simple concept. Instead of storing the ammunition directly inside the crew compartment, the Abrams stores it in a specially designed storage space with a blowout panel. A steel door slides in place to physically separate the crew from the high explosive ammo. If the tank is struck, the force of the ammunition detonating is redirected out and away from the crew. Russia took a different approach to tank safety design. Knowing that the US outmatched it in the air, Russia's plan was to turn tanks into anti-aircraft weapons. It would accomplish this by storing its ammunition in a ring around the turret, which, when struck, would send the tank's turret and its crew dozens of meters up into the air. This was captured on video during the war in Ukraine when an anti-tank missile struck a Russian tank and promptly set the turret flying over 50 meters into the air. But what about drones? Will they change the paradigm? One of the biggest takeaways from the war in Ukraine is the vulnerability of modern tanks against simple FPV drone threats. These small, agile, and most importantly cheap drones can be fitted with shaped explosives capable of penetrating the thinner top armor of the tank. It's estimated that Russia has lost 2,600 tanks since the invasion started, with a significant number of these kills due to simple drones. Tanks were designed in a pre-drone age, and it's questionable if tanks would ever have been developed given the modern drone threat. When an infantryman can knock out a $10 million tank with a $500 drone, it begs if such an expensive weapon system is worth investing in the first place. Western analysts have comforted themselves by saying that the West wouldn't fight the way Russia's fighting, and this is true. Western military power is built from the ground up to be mobile and avoid the entrenched nature of the Ukraine war, overwhelming a foe with superior precision firepower. But Ukraine is giving powerful signals that the age of the tank is over, and hopefully it doesn't take a catastrophic Western military defeat to realize it. But perhaps the Abrams and other tanks can remain relevant and protected from the enemy drone threats. Currently, a few hundred Abrams enjoy the use of the Trophy Active Protection System. This defensive system bolts onto the exterior of the vehicle and is designed to either confuse or intercept incoming threats. It can jam incoming ATGMs or deflect projectiles by shooting out small rounds at them. Infantry be damned. However, future Abrams will be equipped with electronic countermeasures to jam drone signals or even confuse them. This in itself is a temporary solution, as AI will likely very soon make it possible for drones to simply pick out targets on their own if their signal back to their controller is jammed. Laser protection systems are in the works to destroy or damage incoming drones, with the advantage that their use matches the humble drone in terms of cost. Each blast of a laser costs mere cents versus the hundreds or thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars that other anti-drone air defenses can cost per shot. What does the future hold for the Abrams? The US Army is currently looking at how the Abrams fits into future warfare, and there's been talk of designing a brand new tank from scratch. However, what seems probable is that the Abrams will simply continue to evolve. The latest rounds of upgrades is bringing American Abrams up to a modern standard, but upgrades can only go so far. When it comes time to adopt a new tank though, it'll definitely have several predictable features. First and foremost, it'll be an auto-loader, removing a crew member, but also allowing the turret to be less well-armored than it is now, as well as shedding much-needed weight, which can be replaced by active protection systems against enemy drones and anti-tank missiles. These systems will increasingly be of the directed energy variety, and this means that future tanks will need more and larger batteries, with a greater capability to generate electricity. One thing we know for sure is that the Army absolutely wants its future tank to be at least partly electric, easing the burden of frontline logistics by burning less fuel, but also allowing the tanks to operate for short amounts of time on electric power only, significantly reducing their infrared signature. Now go check out what if a single M1 Abrams tank showed up at the Battle of Waterloo, or click this other video instead.